Join our knowledgeable hosts as they dive into the captivating universe of comic books, movies, TV shows, and pop culture. Get ready for vibrant discussions and a shared enthusiasm for all things superhero and beyond. A comic podcast straight from the panels. This is Beyond the Capes.
All right, everyone, welcome back to another episode of Beyond the Cape podcast. With us today, Master Illustrator Amrit Birdi. Welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me.
All right, so we're obviously here to talk about your graphic novel, which we will get into in the second half of the show, but you are an award-winning illustrator. I believe that is what is up on the Instagram.
That's quite the, it's quite the accolade. Like, technically, it is an award-winning thing. Times best-selling, does that count as an award?
Oh, yeah, for sure. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, these kind of things just happen, and then they fly by, and you're like, oh, okay, I did that. But like with anything, it's usually about the trying and the journey and the actual getting there. That it wears off quickly. It's actually it's the triumph of doing it. But then you're on to the next thing before you know it. So it feels like a constant wheel sometimes. But yeah, it's definitely a nice kind of like thing to have achieved. It was definitely a team effort. It wasn't all on me, but yeah, I'm happy with it.
Yeah. Now with Illustrator, I feel like that's a profession you kind of commit to pretty early on, especially like for your comic book creators and usually writing and art. That's usually something they know early on. Was that for you the same? You just kind of knew early on that this style itself was something you want to get into?
Yeah, I mean, my parents always tell me the story to keep me occupied when I was a kid. They give me a piece of paper and a pen just to, keep me occupied so they could like catch up on sleep or something. I don't know, whatever parents do. And yeah, I just never stopped scribbling. So it was something from a really early age, from 2 or 3 years old, that I just loved to do. And then as I kind of grew up, it just kind of snowballed, and I got into writing for a little bit, but art was definitely a constant. And then I saw my first comic book, which was Judge Dredd. It was like not a kid's reprint, but it was definitely a toned down version of Judge Dredd for a slightly younger audience. And I was reading that, and then Spider-Man, and this whole world opened up in terms of sequential storytelling. So from illustration and drawing to telling a story sequentially. So yeah, that was where it really started for me. Probably about 10 years old, I'd say.
Okay. Now coming out of high school, I'm assuming you went into college. Was it right away then for illustration?
Yeah. I mean, it was, so when I was at kind of school, which is I was probably 13 or 14, I really excelled at kind of graphic design and visual communication. So that was quite tangential to art itself. It wasn't actually directly art. In fact, in art at school, my teachers didn't like me that much because I would draw anime and I would draw Dragon Ball Z. And I think they wanted me to draw horses and like the beach. So, I mean, my friends in class loved what I did, but the teachers themselves, I don't think they did. So yeah, I really excelled in design, which is much more, it's still art, but it's definitely more, there's more logic to it. It's more functional. And yeah, so that was kind of my experience at school. And then I kept studying arts, and it was always an interest. In fact, I studied illustration kind of like a university level as well, which was, again, one of those things where you look back on and you say, yeah, that was it was an experience. But again, I've found that it was a strange experience, because again, the lecturers didn't take to my art. Yeah. Again, I think it was the horses and the beach thing. I don't think I could be wrong. I could be really wrong. I don't know if they perceived it as true art and illustration. So, that was my kind of early experience. And I look back and I go, maybe actually studying something more constructive, like law, would have actually served me better to become an illustrator. But I mean, we'd go into that in some detail later. But yeah, my early experiences with art were that kind of I wasn't drawing the right thing, or I wasn't good enough, because of the reaction I was getting from education. Although I kept going, that was my early experience anyway.
Yeah. Well, and it's funny that you mentioned that now, because if anyone goes to your Instagram page, you can see, and I think you've listed it like Adobe and whatnot as kind of one of your proficiencies, and you could see in your work, like especially digital and graphic, it's really well done. You could see the examples on your
I
page.
appreciate that.
And I think it's funny because you might have just been kind of ahead of your time, because you go now to art schools, and I know a lot of
Mhm.
comic book artists have talked about that it is a lot more accepted, I think, in that space, as it's become more kind of open space, and more, I guess, accepted in general. Do you prefer then having more of that freedom on a digital scale versus a pen and paper then?
Yeah, well, I mean, first of all, I guess it is definitely more accepted. I think the movies may have had a lot to do with bringing
Oh yeah.
comics to the zeitgeist, the social zeitgeist. But yeah, it's definitely something that's more accepted, and ahead of time, perhaps. Maybe it was in the wrong circles, and maybe again it was kind of like there was a transition going on between traditional and digital when I was studying, and that was kind of part of it as well. But so yeah, I started drawing on pen and paper or pencils, inks less so at the time. Very traditional pencils. I'd follow the kind of like the pencils, inks, and maybe do digital tidy ups and digital color. And that was great for a while. I think I was still at the phase where I mean, artists, what they tend to do is they tend to have an inspiration or a couple of artists that they want to, that inspire them, and they try to emulate that artist. So for me, it was, guys like Michael Turner, who was an absolute, absolute legend. His style still to this day takes my breath away. So with that, he had a very, very distinct kind of pencil style. I spent so long trying to emulate that, and eventually I realized actually that I wasn't. I needed to find my own style, and I spent about a year transitioning to digital when I was about 20, 21, 22. Um, and I wasn't sure if that was the right thing to do, but transitioning was actually the only thing to do. And I took a real downgrade in my style and overall output for about a year. But if I hadn't have done that, I mean, one of the things I say to young artists today is it's not just the art; it's about making the art commercially viable. And that sounds really soulless, but it's true. Like it
Yeah.
needs to be a product, and without digital, I wouldn't have been able to do that. So it was a really, really good move. So I definitely prefer digital. I mean, I've been working with Adobe for a number of years actually now. They're one of my favorite people to work with. With the digital advances they've helped creators kind of
Yeah.
achieve. And then of course there's the AI stuff at the moment that they've been doing, which again is a whole topic unto itself.
Yeah.
But it's quite cool to be honest. So I
Yeah.
can
Oh, yeah.
talk about that if you want me to.
Yeah. No, and
Yeah.
I think digital is definitely the way to go. And who I just had someone on the show a little bit ago who's also overseas in the UK. Ahmed Rafat.
Oh, yeah, I know. Yeah, I
Yeah.
know. We've
So
been,
it's
I've
great
met.
talking to him, and
Yeah,
it's so great with digital because, and a lot of people have said it, like you can't always get your single issue all over the world. It's just not, it's not feasible.
yeah.
But you can have a digital copy almost all over the world. And I think we see that now with Marvel Unlimited, the DC app, Comixology with Amazon, and honestly, that's
Yeah.
a great way to get your story out to such a wide audience. I mean,
Mm.
I can imagine if you making a by paper graphic novel, who knows when you could ship it to Chile, who knows when it's going to get there,
Yeah,
how much
yeah, it's
how
true.
much is it going to cost, but you upload it to Amazon and they're like, all right, it's been approved. 2 weeks later, someone's reading that story. Um, so yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah, there's two. There's the digital production and then the digital distribution, which honestly, I think publishing's been, I'm not one to preach about how to distribute anything. That's not my side of things, but as an observer, I think publishing generally has been a little slower on the digital side of things than maybe it could have been. But that said, with things like Amazon KDP today, and Marvel Unlimited, and even things like Webtoon,
Yeah.
that's quite a platform. I mean, it's business model wise. I'm not sure it favors the creator entirely, but it gives you a platform to make something of it if you can, and that's really cool in terms of like exposure and getting your, like you say, getting your story seen all around the world in an instant, literally in an instant. That's pretty cool.
Yeah, and I mean, a lot of people I know want to fight it, and they want to create an argument and everything. I mean, we're here to read that everyone wants anyway. And there's always going to be a place for comics, your single issues, your rare variants. And that's what Comic Con celebrates, but definitely getting more people into the fold, this, that,
Yeah,
which, cutting room floor for that.
yeah.
Now, when
I
did you
mean,
decide? When did you decide to get into graphic novel? I mean, where did you make that transition where you just kind of realize, like, you know what, I've got my feet wet now in illustration, art's moving along. I think I want to tell my story.
that's a good question. Sorry, first of all, do we have a slight lag? Am I delayed slightly?
I think your picture might be a little frozen, but your audio is still coming in. It's just kind of catching up. So I think we're good on this end.
Okay, let me know because I lost you there for a second. But yeah, I mean, in terms of just I didn't quite catch it all, but just to comment on comics and print comics and I these days I treat kind of single issues as um, maybe digital, and if I really like the overall story, I'll go and buy the trade and have
Yeah.
it as like a physical kind of edition, like something that I would cherish, so to speak. But yeah, no. Sorry, the next question was.
So, like, where did you begin in your illustrating career where you finally
Yeah.
decided that you were ready to tell your own story, that you had enough
mm,
experience and you're ready to transition to that point?
That's a really good question. I mean, I first started. I One of the jobs of an artist is to really absorb a script. Like a script is a love letter from a writer to an artist to visualize, especially in comics and graphic novels. And over the years growing up, I'd always excelled at storytelling. It became visual storytelling along the way, but really, I think it was probably actually around 2016 or 2017 that I first thought, I can do this in terms of actually constructing and writing a story. And I really needed to do some work. I needed to get a lot of really bad stuff out before it got good. So I really, what I wanted to do was spend a number of years kind of honing and refining the craft before even trying to actually write and transition something. So I mean, by the time I had started writing my first story, I'd drawn one, two, three, maybe like 7 or 8 like commercial graphic novels that had all sold pretty well. I mean, one of the latest ones is the Alex Rider series from Anthony Horowitz, who he's written things like Sherlock Holmes and I think maybe James Bond. But the Alex Rider series is a best-selling series. It's an Amazon TV show. It's a really well constructed show. It's basically
Yeah.
James Bond for kids, and it's really awesome. Like as a kid, I would have loved that. So I'd read some really credible material in terms of understanding storytelling, in terms of understanding pacing, plot beats, and how to construct an overall narrative. I had some really good experience under my belt, and it was just about, like I said, it was just about me knuckling down and actually trying to do it and realizing what my shortfalls were before attempting something of my own, for real, so to speak. And around 2019, 2020, it was during lockdown actually. I really started to push this into overdrive. So I mean, the graphic novel I've been working on at the moment, Rid of You, which is my first kind of graphic novel release. This has been in the works for, I say 2 years, but it's probably more like three or four. There's probably two or three iterations of this story that have already been written that will never see the light of day because they're really, really bad. Um, and even then, even, with all of that time, and a creator always needs a sounding board, a creator always needs external feedback.
Yep.
And over the years, I've been working with lots of brands, delivering kind of like commercial illustration work. And over that time, I'd also built some really nice relationships with other creators. So I had a girl called Madeline Savage. She came to me years ago with this project. She wanted me to draw it, and at the time, I'd just done some really, really quite exciting, kind of highly exposed work, and it was in a way like, I really admired how she came up to me and was just like, I want you to draw this. And I was like, yeah, okay, I'll help you. I really admired it. Anyway, over the years, we've worked together on a lot of different things. And when it came to refining Rid of You as a story, she was the person I went to help me refine the initial scripts. So I gave her the whole brain dump of ideas. I gave her kind of like the plot beats. I gave her the whole outline. I gave her the kind of the philosophical core, everything I needed to kind of like show someone, and I
Yeah,
asked her to do a version of it basically, and she did. And many iterations later, again, it's a very different story to even the one she came up with, but she was instrumental in helping shape it. So it's something that I'd say we did together, and yes, I hope people gonna like it. Yeah.
definitely. And I'm glad you brought up pacing. That's the one thing I think I probably get made fun of the most. Um, you could have you could have Neil Adams come back, make a comic book, get Chris Claremont on it, Stan Lee contributes to it. But if you don't have good pacing, you don't understand the page turn to a book, and
Yeah.
how to put your panels in the right spot, you could put every famous writer and artist on this book. It could still be bad. Those
Yeah.
small
Yeah.
mechanics
Absolutely.
that you don't think about contribute so much to the story. And I think a lot of us sometimes overlook it. But when you
Yeah.
find that story that's so perfect and it just keeps reading page after page, you kind of realize like there's so much perfect about it. And that's
Yeah.
definitely a great way to get those under your belt and work that out before putting this out.
Yeah, for sure. No, in terms of pacing, absolutely. We can talk broader storytelling pacing, and then we can talk, comic specific pacing, which again, like comics and graphic novels, they're their own art form
Yeah,
in their own right, and there's a way to tell a story in a graphic novel or a comic, but it doesn't. You can't take a screenplay and make it and draw a comic from it. You can adapt it 100%. Same with a novel, but you couldn't take one. Like I couldn't take a novel and just draw a graphic novel. It would have to go through serious iterations of editing and reworking to kind of become a viable graphic novel. And so comics and graphic novels are their own art form for sure. And then yeah, in terms of the pacing for something like Rid of You, I mean, it started off as like a six issue story. So it was maybe 120 pages, like 22 or 24 issue, 6 issues, so maybe 132. Anyway, over time, what I found and what the feedback was from a number of editors I'd gone to was that the pacing wasn't really there. It was being rushed through. Like what was happening was the story was bigger than the amount of space we'd given, and there wasn't enough time. There wasn't enough space for the characters to breathe or to really expand upon the world, and it was a very functional overview of a story with a moral message, and that came up at least three times when I was going through editorial. So yeah, that was when I decided to take that story and make it three graphic novels actually, and they're all finished and they're all ready to go. And this is the first part of the story. So what I'm working on now, Rid of You season one is, well, first season. So yeah, that's just touch on pacing and getting that right. I think we've nailed it. I'm slightly biased, but I think we have.
No, well, we're gonna find out soon. So, Rid of You is your current project.
Mm.
If for everyone listening, if they are interested in it, how would you give the elevator pitch? Your 30 seconds to sell the story. What's the synopsis?
Yeah, I mean, it's a combination of. So first of all, it was kind of an anime-inspired story that really touches upon themes of kind of love, death, and the fundamental core of it is memories and can you ever truly be rid of your past? And this was something that I was reflecting on. I think we all had a lot of time to think through
Yes.
lockdowns and COVID. And one of the things that came up for me, I was doing a lot of life reflection at the time, call it a midlife crisis or whatever you want to call it. And one of the things was, does does the past control my current decisions, and does the past control my future? And I found that concept really, really interesting. And to a degree, the experiences we've all had in our lives dictate the decisions we make today and where we're going to end up in the future. So one of the main things I wanted to tackle with this story is that really is how the past can control us, and how we may or may not, in fact, be able to break free from its clutches, so to speak. And what we this isn't really an elevator pitch. This is a bit deeper than that. But what we've got are two characters, and the fundamental philosophy behind the story is two characters that come from opposite ends of that spectrum. One thinks they need to be rid of the past, and the other actually is overly attached to the past, and it's kind of two opposites. And these characters ending up in a romantic entanglement is adds to the tension really. So not an elevator pitch, but I hope it gives a good vibe of what it might entail.
Yeah, definitely. So it sounds like, I mean, and COVID was great, I think, overall for a lot of indie creators, in general, even people that had never stepped foot. I know we've had a lot of people on the show that were never even going to make a comic book until COVID hit. So there is a lot of good that did come from it. It
That's
sounds
really
like
cool
then,
though.
yeah, it sounds like you put a
Yeah.
lot of yourself then into this story, or at least kind of your experiences, real world into the creation.
Yeah, I mean, I think, and this is where it gets a bit blurry. I think I put a lot of my thoughts into the story, and a lot of my less so experiences. It was about finding a way to visualize and verbalize the experiences in a way. And this is where I think Maddie helped a lot as well, in helping shape that. So I had more of the philosophy side of it, and more of the kind of the character arc side of it, and it needed to be refined into a less of a functional story, more of an actual narrative. And she helped weave together the idea of kind of what we really wanted to do was tell what I was finding at the time, and we both agreed on this at the time when we were talking, was that everything got too meta at a certain point in
Yeah.
terms of, everything was so overly aware of itself in terms of the kind of things that were being produced, at least in my view, that we wanted to go back to basics and try and tell a really simple story really well with complex characters, and complex issues within those characters. So the idea of something like Rid of You being fundamentally almost a fairy tale, with a boy who meets a girl who is a fairy from another realm, and then give it kind of a darker twist, more of a Maleficent kind of twist on that, and where that could go to help accentuate the original kind of like the original idea of memories and how they might affect us. That was the framing that we used to kind of bring this to life. So it's fundamentally a fairy tale, that would potentially go right or wrong. But we just wanted to tell a really simple story, really, really well, with a nice dark edge to it, and I think we've done that.
Definitely. Now, obviously, I'm assuming you're going to put this to print at some point, to have a physical copy. But I know, obviously, we talked about having a digital. The one thing that I'm very curious about, because it looks amazing from your Instagram page,
Appreciate that.
is it almost looks like an interactive graphic novel. I don't know if that's just kind of as you were putting it out there, or if you had any plans of doing a story like this as an interactive graphic novel.
That's a really good question. I mean, really, I think what I'd always wanted this to be was a, so in my, I say my day job, after I got very, very busy with kind of like creative work, around 10 years ago, I set up a small studio, and I've been working with lots of different people. And as that's kind of like grown in terms of the work we've been delivering, I've gone into animation a lot, actually. And the idea, the idea of comics being sequential static storytelling, animations the next step on that.
Yeah.
And that's interested me greatly. So really, Rid of You, I would love to see as a full motion animated feature. Like, that would be the absolute dream. So the animated bits and some of the trailer that you might have seen, it really stems from that. The idea that I'd love to see this in full motion. An animated, an interactive comic. I hadn't actually really thought of that. I thought of doing an animated version of the story, maybe like a 2.5D kind of like, not quite full motion, but really freaking cool version of it. But I think in the first instance, we're going to keep it simple. Do Kickstarter. Mostly, I mean, the books are done, like they're done. So Kickstarter is a really great platform to raise funds, but also to kind of draw attention to cool projects. And I think this is a cool project, and I think it's going to do really well on Kickstarter in terms of it's well positioned to sit on Kickstarter in terms of the other kind of projects they have on there. They were actually kind enough to repost some of the animated artwork to their Instagram, which was really nice of them, actually. I think Kickstarter is the right place for this, and it really is hopefully going to be a way to raise the profile of the project and print the copies that we need to print to get it out to all the hopefully the wonderful people that help us bring it to life, and from there release the next two, and then maybe do something like Amazon KDP for kind of ongoing distribution. I mean, Amazon KDP, there are mixed opinions about it, but I mean, I've heard some really good things lately in terms of my writer friends and what they've been able to achieve on there. I'm quite excited about KDP in terms of distribution and things like that. So, I mean, one thing I did really want to do with this story is not go the publisher route. I've done enough projects with publishers. I've got a few things lined up, which is really exciting, for different IPs for publishers. So there's a new Alex Rider coming out this year that we finished at the end of last year. I'm doing a book with Black Box, which I can't say too much about now. So there is publisher work coming up, but this project I really did not want to go to a publisher with. I wanted it to kind of be my thing, if that makes sense. Which is why we've gone the Kickstarter route.
Definitely. Now I'm assuming then, since the books are done, you've seen or you have the books like in hand?
They're ready to go to print. So some of the funds from the Kickstarter will go to printing and hopefully overprinting copies so that we can continue to fulfill after the Kickstarter. I've printed a few like proof of concept demo copies, like proof copies, just so I can make sure it's looking good. But there's such a big difference with color palettes and with the look of something in print versus on screen. So I just like to make sure, and I'm doing a couple of tiny tweaks to a couple of pages. I will play with this until it has to go to print, basically. So there's no end to this work. So it's, but I mean, it can go to print now. I'm doing a few tiny little tweaks here and there, just to kind of like, just because I can. But yeah, it's ready to go.
Yeah. Now, one of the more interesting things, and this will definitely apply to you very soon. the one thing I think some people don't realize in the moment, and it passes by them so quickly until they realize it, is at some point you're going to have this physical copy in your hands with your name at the bottom, like in completion, and like you have completed the graphic novel. It might even be sold at cons or maybe at some point in stores. I don't know if you've had that kind of that experience yet, or this is something that will be new for you. Kind of that moment, like you saw it through to the end, it's done, and like you have the finished product.
Yeah, I mean, again, that is a good question. I've done, I think around 2014, 2015, I did my first graphic novel with a publisher, and there was a quite a large YouTuber attached, and that was it sold really really well. So I'm used to having kind of books in stores distributed worldwide. My name on the books, the Alex Rider books, for example, cover credit, which is really, really nice. And people send me pictures. They're like at the airport, and they take a picture of the window, and like Alex Rider's there with my name on it, which is really like it's still a cool experience.
Yeah.
So I'm not necessarily you know phased by that, but it is the fact that I've spent 10 years delivering work to other people, whether it's a brand or whether it's another IP, or like even the Assassin's Creed covers that I did. Like it's really cool to work on them. I send them, they go to print. That's great. I was able to contribute a tiny, tiny stitch in this huge tapestry, which is super cool. But this will be the first thing that I've done and created, from scratch myself. And I say myself, like Maddie's assistance is not to be downplayed in any way, but the amount of work and years I have actually put into this, like that's probably the bigger thing for me. It's like, oh, it's like I've been working on this for so long. It's like, oh, now it's actually finished. Now I can't keep tweaking it, and that's probably the biggest thing, actually. Yeah, that makes me more nervous than anything.
Yeah, definitely. But I think once you get it, you'll definitely that fruition, like seeing that fruition come bearing its gifts, is always great. Now the big question is, obviously you said this is season 1, so you do have a plan. It sounds like down the road of kind of where you want to see the story go. You've spaced it out enough to give ample time. One thing I'm always curious about, especially with indie creators, is this a character where this is a one and done narrative for you, or do you think you have other stories to tell and you could start creating kind of your own story universe or storyline in general?
Yeah, I mean that's definitely the plan in terms of like I don't believe necessarily in looking too far ahead. But the overall plan is to release these 3 books over, roughly speaking, a 12-month period. And it's the original story was 120 pages, and this is where it comes back to me being more of an artist, like a visual artist than a writer, although a storyteller. So I take the scripts and I follow scripts to the letter. I enhance them where I can. I touch base with writers, but because this is mine, I turn that 120-page story script into a 200-page graphic novel. I then went back and repaced certain elements, and it turned into 260 pages by the end of it. And another 20 pages I so I've got 280 pages of story kind of ready to go on this, and the first book's about 104 pages. And I want to spend about a year releasing that, and we're already working on the next books, so this is going to be like the trilogy is done, and then we're on to the next kind of set of projects. So I would aim to be looking to release around 3 or 4 graphic novels a year on an ongoing basis, without talking too big a game. I've gotten really quick with my artwork production over the last 10 years. Doing nothing prepared me for professional work like
Correct.
there's no preparation for it than that. And when I studied illustration, it's like, oh, I use 6 weeks and you can draw 4 illustrations. It's like, no, you got 6 hours and you got to do 10 illustrations. And It's more like that. So that kind of experience has gotten me really quick at doing things. So 4 a year is probably 400-page graphic novels a year is probably about right.
Yeah, awesome. Now, obviously, this is your first project from scratch, at least from start to finish. What is the one thing during this process that you did not realize would be more as hard as it was, but you would give it as advice to other aspiring creators to focus in on, because it will save them a lot of heartache and a lot of frustration?
That's really, that's a really good question. I think most of my lessons were on the writing side more than the art side. To talk generally about the art side, which I could do literally all day long in terms of like artwork production and efficient kind of pipelines and things like that, is kind of what I do. I think from an art side, and this is something that we did for Rid of You, so this is why objectively, the visuals are quite strong, because from the get-go, I did a lot of exploration as to how the book was going to look, the aesthetic, the overall style. I defined the style, I defined the background style. I've worked with a number of artists to help produce concept art for the backgrounds and things like that. So again, tapping into my professional network to help me produce this kind of worked really nicely. So in terms of defining the visual style for the project up front is a real utility. Things like character turnarounds and character designs, expressions like expression sheets for faces, and what this can also do from an art production perspective is you then have a library of assets that you can use throughout that ends up speeding up production. So if you do loads of work at the beginning on defining how your characters are going to look, creating nice layered artwork. So in some of the animations that we've done, we've got kind of hair blowing and things like that. And the animator had to do, I got some help with the animation on a couple of those that I had to cut out certain bits of it. But really, it was nice layered artwork. And I can use that artwork throughout the story, throughout the actual graphic novel, which really sped up production, which is why it can produce 100 pages in like 2 months or whatever it might be. So that's on the art side. I think on the writer side, the thing that I might have learned, and this is something that I need to refine in myself, because I'm an artist, I wanted to put pen to paper way too quickly. Like I really, really needed to go through another, and it was frustrating at the time because I'd been through 2 iterations of this story, and by the 3rd iteration, I was like, I just need to just draw something now. Like seriously, I just need to draw something. If I'd have just done one more round of script and editorial, I would have saved myself probably a lot of maybe 3 or 4 months worth of work in redraws and in repacing if I'd have just held off until the script was perfect. So if you're a writer, what I learned about writers in this process was something I never really thought about before. Writers have to be really, really kind of cerebral and imaginative, and I guess it's an appreciation for a writer and how they must visualize a graphic novel in their heads before
Yeah.
an artist even envision. But they have to let go. Like at that point, they've already seen the whole thing in their head, and they have to let go of it and let someone else bring it to life. And that's trust. That's real trust. So in terms of like, that's probably the biggest thing I learned actually. The experience of a writer kind of handing over a baby to an artist to bring to life, and that's probably the biggest thing. That was nice. That a nice lesson to learn.
Yeah. It's funny because someone once told me, he's like, "Oh man, when you have a writer and an artist and they're collaborating, he's like, the writer sees the story in nothing but words, and
Yeah.
they don't see it in any art, and an artist
Oh,
sees the
really?
story, and the artist sees the story in nothing but art with no words, and you're trying to get these two people to now combine these two thoughts into a story."
That's
Um,
super interesting. Maybe I'm just seeing it all from an artist perspective. Have you got Crackle, by the way? Is that just on my end?
oh, it was just a little bit, but nothing major. We're good now.
Yeah, that's really, really interesting, actually. Maybe I am just seeing even my lesson from an artist perspective. But still, even so, that was a nice.
Yeah. You cut out there for a little bit, but yeah, I mean, it sounds like you have a good grasp on it now, at least, and kind of fusing those two ideas and those two notions kind of together. And obviously, we have a story in front of us. So, for everyone listening, where can they find the story? How can they get involved with the next steps of getting maybe book 2 or waiting for a second printing of book 1? Where's the best place to start finding you and finding your story?
Yeah, good question. So we're launching book 1 on Kickstarter in 2024. We're hoping to launch before the second half of the year, so around May, June time. We've got a Kickstarter kind of pre-launch page, and then a landing page with a trailer. I think I can send you the links if you need. And that's probably the best place to start. I would say if there's anything that anyone can do to help right now, it's probably to follow the Kickstarter pre-launch page, because I'm using that as a real waypoint as to when it's ready to launch. Once there's enough interest garnered in the actual concept and the artwork, that's kind of when I'm ready to launch it. So I'm in no rush to launch it as such just yet. I want it to be the right time. I want to have reached the right people. And so the Kickstarter page is probably the best place to go. Hit the notify button. That way I can send you an email when it launches. And that's probably the best thing that anyone can do right now.
All right. And then the best place to find you if they're interested.
Yeah, Instagram is a really good place. At Amrit_Birdi with an underscore at the end. Someone stole my actual name, and then I had to do an underscore at the end. And then I looked up who stole my name, and it was an account that I made 3 years prior. And then I forgot the password, and I can't get access to it now. So again, I'll send you the link if you need. But or you tag me in maybe on Instagram or something. But that's what, if you can hang out online, that's probably where I hang out.
Awesome. And now before we end this, the one thing I'm always curious about is obviously you have a familiarity within graphic novels and comic books, and if you were given the chance to do a graphic novel, one company came to you and said, you know what, take whatever character you want, make whatever graphic novel you want to do you have that one character?
Wow, I do actually, and it's funny. I like to take the first thing that I think of, and you saw my reaction. I think maybe
Yes.
the answer would have been different 5 years ago, and probably different 10 years ago. But the answer today would be it's actually a video game that I'd love to do an adaptation of. Final Fantasy VIII. I would
Yes.
love to do a graphic novel, whether it's a sequel or continuation of that story. I think there was so much mileage to it, and there was so much nuance to the characters in the world that didn't get explored. And it's the one that doesn't receive the love from
Correct.
Square Enix, and it's my favorite one. So that Squall, Rinoa, everyone from Final Fantasy VIII. I would pick Final Fantasy VIII 100%.
Yes, I would wholeheartedly agree. Funny enough, seeing them get their comeuppance in Kingdom Hearts, the video game, I was so happy because I would agree. 8 is one of my favorite games. 7 was great. This remake was great, but animated movies are always great for Final Fantasy, and that would be no exception. Especially if you were to do a graphic novel, that would be awesome.
Yeah, that's, I'm glad you're a fan. I'm playing the 7. I'm playing Rebirth at the moment, which is really good. It's really good, but it's not 8 for me. It's 7, which is great as well. But yeah,
Yeah,
everyone's got their favorite.
Everyone's
bit, I
got one.
guess. Yeah,
I know 10-2 for some people is
10 is good. 10 is
10
exceptional.
is good.
10-2, not so. 10 was exceptional, like truly exceptional. Yeah, that was really good. So yeah, big gamer as well, but Final Fantasy specifically, and near or Automata,
Automata, yes.
and near Replicant prequel actually. I took me by surprise. That was very good.
Yeah.
You played that?
Yeah. I played the first Nier a long time ago. because
What, when he
someone
was
said,
an old dude, or the
yeah,
old dude
when
version?
they said,
Yeah,
"Oh, you
yeah,
have
yeah,
to
yeah.
beat the game 37 times to get every ending," and I said, "No, I'm good.
Yeah,
That's it.
yeah,
One ending's enough. I'm okay with not knowing the secret."
yeah, yeah. Oh god,
Yes.
I got Replicant in a bundle. I wanted to play Automata. Am I saying that right? Automata.
Yeah, I think
Yeah,
I think that's how I say it.
Automata. Anyway, I got Replicant in a bundle, and I was like, well, it was on sale in the PlayStation store. I was like, okay, well, this is the prequel. It makes sense to play this first. I'm just going to play it. It blew my mind. It was in a way, it ruined Automata for me because it was that good. It was that good to me. I loved that game. Yeah, just total tangent, but yeah, that was a good game.
Awesome. All right. Well, thanks for joining us. Thanks for answering our questions. I know everyone's going to be on the lookout for Rid of You. We're going to have the links in the comments to both this YouTube video and on Instagram. We look forward to having you back on the show when you got the other books out, and we'll continue the story. Thanks for coming on. Everyone listening, have a good night.
Thanks for having me, man.
No problem.